Okay, so you're about to give a safety talk to your team. Pretty important stuff, right? We're diving deep into this HSSC World podcast episode to, help you kind of knock it out of the park. Think of it as like a crash course in becoming a safety guru. We'll uncover some seriously insightful stuff you can use to make your talk engaging and memorable. Oh, and packed with crucial info, of course.
Yeah, I love that goal. And, it's interesting because this HSSE World episode starts off with a point that I think a lot of people miss, near misreporting.
Yep.
They say it's actually a better predictor of future accidents than actual accident rates.
Oh, wow. That's kind of mind-blowing. So, like, if I encourage my team to report, like, every close call, no matter how small it seems,
Yeah.
that could actually help prevent bigger accidents down the line.
Exactly. It's all about creating a culture of, awareness and proactivity. And speaking of awareness, this episode dives into the top 10 workplace hazards. And let's start with the big one. Falls from heights. It's the #1 cause of death in construction, but honestly, it can happen anywhere.
Oh, for sure. Like, I remember that time I saw someone on a ladder trying to hang decorations in her office, and I was like, wrong move, and yikes. But why are falls so common? Is it just, like, bad luck? Or is there something else going on?
Well, think about the common scenarios, right? Scaffolding, ladders, roofs. These inherently involve working at height. But the real issue often comes down to two things: inadequate training and improper use of safety equipment.
Okay, so it's not just about having the right gear. It's about knowing how to use it correctly. Like, harnesses and lanyards are only effective if they're worn and anchored properly.
Precisely. And for your safety talk, you could really drive this point home by discussing different types of fall arrest systems. For example, a self-retracting lifeline versus a static lanyard. Each has its pros and cons depending on the situation.
Oh, that's cool. That's a level of detail that I feel like most safety talks miss. It's not just wear a harness, it's understand the nuances of your fall protection system. I'm taking notes already. Speaking of potentially shocking situations, let's talk about electrical hazards.
Yes. Electricity. We tend to focus on like the big dramatic shocks. But what's fascinating is that the most common electrical injuries are actually from those smaller repeated exposures over time. Like using faulty equipment day after day.
Wait, really? So that tingling sensation you get from a frayed wire? Or that old drill that sparks every time you use it? Those seemingly minor issues can actually add up to serious problems over time.
Absolutely. We're talking nerve damage, muscle weakness,
Yeah.
even heart problems.
Yeah.
And think about the costs associated with those injuries too. Medical bills, lost productivity, potential legal issues. It's a ripple effect.
Wow, okay. That definitely changes my perspective on those, like, minor electrical issues. So for our listener, what's one actionable step they can take to address this with their team?
Easy. Initiate a tool safety audit. Make it a fun team activity where you inspect every piece of electrical equipment. Look for frayed wires, damaged plugs, anything out of the ordinary. And make sure everyone knows to report these issues immediately. No more brushing things under the rug.
I love it. Now, on to a hazard that might not be as, like, visually dramatic as a fall or an electrical spark, but can be just as dangerous: chemical hazards.
Right. And with chemical hazards, the effects can range from, immediate burns to long-term health issues like respiratory problems or even cancer. And what's often overlooked is that the impact can be delayed, making it even harder to connect the dots.
So someone might be exposed to a harmful chemical today, but not experience any symptoms for months or even years down the line. That's terrifying.
Exactly. It highlights the importance of those material safety data sheets, MSDS. They provide detailed information about each chemical, including potential hazards, safe handling procedures, first aid measures. They're basically your safety Bible for dealing with chemicals.
Okay, so don't just glance at the label. Really understand what you're dealing with by consulting the MSDS. That's a great takeaway for a listener. Now, what about those hazards that kind of creep up on you slowly? I'm talking about ergonomic hazards.
Ergonomics.
Yeah.
It might not sound as exciting as falls or explosions, but it can slowly and surely wreak havoc on your body. Think back pain, carpal tunnel syndrome,
Right.
neck pain, all those aches and pains we tend to just accept as part of the job.
Yeah. It's like death by 1,000 paper cuts, or in this case, 1,000 keystrokes.
Yeah.
But how do we make this engaging for a safety talk? Don't slouch at your desk. Doesn't exactly get people fired up.
True. But you can make it relatable. Share real-world case studies. For instance, you could discuss how a company implemented ergonomic interventions. Adjustable chairs, keyboard trays, regular stretch breaks, and saw a significant decrease in musculoskeletal injuries and a boost in productivity.
Ooh, I like that. It's not just about avoiding pain, it's about optimizing performance. Now let's shift gears to something a bit more fiery. We've got to talk about fire hazards.
Absolutely. And when it comes to fire, it's not just about knowing how to use a fire extinguisher, though that's crucial, of course. It's about understanding the science behind fire. The fire triangle: fuel, oxygen, heat is a simple yet powerful concept that can really bring this hazard to life.
Okay, so for our listener who's prepping their safety talk, how would they use this fire triangle concept to engage their team?
Have them visualize their workplace. What are the potential fuel sources? Where's the oxygen coming from? What could be a source of ignition? By understanding how these elements interact, you can identify and mitigate fire hazards more effectively.
It's like turning your workplace into a fire safety puzzle. Engaging, educational, and potentially life-saving. I'm digging it. Now, let's talk about something that might seem obvious, but deserves special attention. Machinery hazards. We're talking heavy-duty equipment with the potential for some, serious injuries.
Yes. And what's often overlooked with machinery hazards is the human factor. We tend to focus on the mechanical aspects.
Yeah.
Guards, safety features, lockout procedures, which are all critical, of course. But what about complacency, distractions,
Yeah.
rushing through tasks? These human factors can significantly increase the risk of accidents.
So it's not just about having the right safety systems in place. It's about creating a work environment where people feel comfortable, slowing down, double-checking their work, and speaking up if something feels off.
Precisely. You could even share anecdotes or near-miss stories that illustrate how human error can lead to machinery accidents. It'll make the message hit home much harder than just listing rules and regulations.
That's powerful. It's about connecting with people on an emotional level, not just bombarding them with information.
Exactly. Now let's talk about a hazard that often sneaks up on people: noise hazards. We tend to underestimate the impact of prolonged exposure to loud noises, but it can lead to permanent hearing loss.
Yeah, and it's not just construction sites or factories. Even seemingly not that loud environments, like offices or restaurants, can contribute to hearing damage over time.
Right. And for your safety talk,
Yeah.
you could challenge your team to think about all the different sounds they're exposed to throughout their workday. Then you can delve into the different types of hearing protection available.
Okay, so it's not just about wearing earplugs or earmuffs. It's about choosing the right type of protection for the specific noise level and environment. What else can our listeners share with their team to make this topic really stick?
Talk about the long-term consequences of hearing loss. It's not just about not being able to enjoy music or conversations. It can lead to social isolation, depression, even cognitive decline.
Whoa, that's heavy. Definitely a message worth emphasizing. Now, let's move on to a hazard that might not be relevant to every workplace, but is crucial for those who are exposed: radiation hazards.
Absolutely. Radiation is an invisible threat, so it's vital to dispel any myths or misconceptions. You could discuss common sources of radiation in the workplace, like X-ray machines or certain industrial processes.
And I'm guessing the protective gear is pretty intense in those environments.
It can be. Lead aprons, radiation badges. These are essential tools for minimizing exposure. And what's fascinating is that radiation exposure is cumulative over a lifetime. So even small exposures over time can add up.
It's like a silent, invisible danger that you have to be constantly aware of. Okay, let's shift gears to something we can all relate to: temperature hazards. I mean, we've all experienced being too hot or too cold at work, but when does it become a real danger?
That's a great question. We often dismiss temperature as just a mere discomfort, but it can quickly escalate into a serious hazard. On one end of the spectrum, you have heat stress, which can lead to heat exhaustion or even heat stroke. On the other end, you have hypothermia, which can be just as dangerous.
So it's not just about feeling sweaty or shivering. It's about understanding the physiological effects of extreme temperatures on the body.
Exactly. For your safety talk, you could highlight real-world scenarios. For example, construction workers exposed to extreme heat, or warehouse workers spending hours in refrigerated spaces.
And I'm guessing prevention strategies would look different for each scenario, right?
Absolutely. For hot environments, it's all about staying hydrated, taking frequent breaks in shaded areas, and recognizing the early signs of heat stress. For cold environments, it's about layering clothing, protecting extremities, and being aware of the signs of hypothermia.
It's like tailoring the safety measures to the specific temperature risks of the workplace. And speaking of risks that can vary greatly depending on the work environment, let's talk about violence hazards.
This is a sensitive yet crucial topic. While violence can occur anywhere, certain professions, like healthcare or social work, face a higher risk. And it's not just about physical violence. Verbal abuse, threats, intimidation, These can be just as damaging.
So how do we approach this in a safety talk without being like alarmist or creating unnecessary fear?
Focus on prevention and de-escalation. Discuss common triggers for workplace violence, such as stress, frustration, or personal problems.
So it's about creating a work environment where people feel supported and respected, where they have channels to address their concerns before they escalate.
Exactly. And for your safety talk,
Sure.
you can provide practical tips on de-escalation techniques, active listening, maintaining a calm demeanor, setting boundaries. These are all valuable skills that can help diffuse a potentially volatile situation.
Wow, I'm realizing that there's so much more to workplace safety than I initially thought.
Right. It's a multifaceted issue that goes beyond just wearing hard hats and safety glasses.
Right. It's about creating a culture of awareness, prevention,
Yeah.
and respect. And you've given our listeners some amazing tools to make their safety talk truly impactful. Now, before we dive into even more practical tips and actionable advice, let's take a quick break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. All right, we're back and ready to dive into more practical tips for making your safety talk a hit. You know, sometimes safety talks can feel a bit, well, preachy. How do we make sure the message actually sticks with our teams?
That's where storytelling comes in. Instead of just listing rules,
Yeah.
share real-life examples,
Yeah.
anecdotes, even near misses. When people connect emotionally with the message, it's far more likely to resonate.
Right. Like, remember when Sarah almost slipped on that wet floor? Let's learn from Sarah's close call and make sure it doesn't happen again.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to make it interactive. Ask questions, encourage discussion, even use humor, appropriately, of course. The more engaged your team is, the more they'll retain.
So it's about turning safety into a conversation, not a lecture. And I think a key part of that is making it relevant to people's everyday work. It's easy to tune out when you think, oh, that'll never happen to me.
You're hitting at a crucial point. We need to bridge that gap between general safety principles and the specific tasks people do every day. So let's say you're giving a safety talk to a team that uses power tools. Instead of just saying, wear safety glasses, share a story about someone who experienced an eye injury and how those glasses literally saved their sight.
Oh, wow. That's powerful. It's like suddenly those safety glasses aren't just a rule. They're a shield protecting something precious.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And when you connect safety to real-world consequences, it becomes much more tangible, much more personal. Another powerful tool is data. Did you know that the cost of workplace injuries goes far beyond medical bills?
I'd imagine so. What kind of costs are we talking about?
There's lost productivity, the cost of retraining a new employee, potential legal fees, and even increased insurance premiums. When you put it all together, it paints a very compelling picture for investing in a strong safety culture.
Yeah. It's like safety is not just a feel-good initiative. It's a smart business decision. Okay, so we've talked about engaging our teams, making it relevant, using storytelling and data. But let's be real. Sometimes people just want the quick and dirty version. What are some absolute must-know takeaways we can leave our listeners with?
Excellent question. If I had to boil it down, I'd say there are 3 core principles to emphasize: awareness, prevention, and action.
Okay. I'm liking this. Break it down for us.
First, awareness. It all starts with being aware of the hazards that exist in your workplace. That means taking the time to understand the risks associated with your job, knowing what safety protocols are in place, and being vigilant about potential dangers.
So it's like that saying, knowledge is power.
Precisely. The more you know, the better equipped you are to stay safe. Next, prevention. This is all about taking proactive steps to minimize risks. That means using safety equipment correctly, following established procedures, and most importantly, speaking up if you see something unsafe.
Yeah. Don't be afraid to be the safety champion, even if it seems like a small thing.
Exactly. Even small actions can prevent big accidents. And finally, action. This is about knowing what to do in an emergency. Do you know where the fire exits are? Do you know how to use a fire extinguisher? Have you ever practiced your company's emergency procedures?
Oh, wow. That's hitting close to home. I'm realizing I need a refresher on our emergency procedures. Stat. Do you have any tips for making this part of the safety talk more engaging?
Turn it into a game.
Yeah.
You could create a fun quiz or a scavenger hunt to test your team's knowledge of emergency procedures. Make it a competition with prizes. People learn best when they're having fun.
That's brilliant. So practice makes perfect. Even when it comes to safety, this is really making me think about how I approach safety in my own life, not just at work.
That's fantastic to hear. Because safety isn't just a workplace concern. It's a mindset, a way of life.
It's about being present, being aware,
Yeah,
and taking care of ourselves and each other.
exactly. And when we approach safety with that mindset,
Mm.
we create a ripple effect that extends far beyond the workplace.
Okay, that's giving me all the good vibes. But before we get too zen, let's bring it back to those top 10 hazards we discussed earlier. Any final tips or insights you want to highlight for each one?
Absolutely. Let's recap with an action item for each hazard.
Okay, I'm ready to take notes.
First up, falls from heights, action item. Before starting any work at height, conduct a thorough risk assessment, identify potential fall hazards, and implement control measures, like guardrails or safety nets.
So it's not enough to just have the equipment. You have to actively think about the specific risks and how to mitigate them.
Exactly. Next, electrical hazards, action item. Implement a lockout tagout procedure for any electrical work. This ensures that the power is completely shut off before anyone starts working on the equipment, preventing accidental energization.
Lockout, tagout. That's a lifesaver.
Now, for chemical hazards.
Yeah.
Action item. Go beyond just reading the labels. Conduct a comprehensive inventory of all the chemicals in your workplace and make sure they're properly labeled, stored, and disposed of.
It's like spring cleaning for chemicals.
Right. Now, onto ergonomic hazards. Action item. Provide ergonomic assessments for your employees. This involves evaluating their workstations and making adjustments to reduce strain and improve comfort.
And I'm guessing this goes beyond just adjusting chair height.
Absolutely. It could involve providing ergonomic keyboards and mice, monitor arms, footrests, even standing desks. It's about customizing the workspace to fit the individual.
Now for fire hazards, action item. Conduct regular fire drills and make sure everyone knows their evacuation route and assembly point.
And make sure your fire extinguishers are readily accessible and properly maintained. You never know when you might need them.
Yeah, it's like fire safety isn't just about prevention, it's about preparedness. Now, for machinery hazards, action item. Implement a robust machine guarding program. This involves identifying all potential hazards associated with each machine and installing appropriate guards to prevent contact with moving parts.
And regular inspections are crucial to ensure that the guards are in good working order and haven't been bypassed or removed.
Safety first. No shortcuts when it comes to heavy machinery.
For sure. Now for noise hazards, action item. Conduct a noise survey to identify areas where noise levels exceed safe limits. Then, implement engineering controls, like sound-absorbing materials or quieter equipment, to reduce noise at the source.
So it's not just about protecting individual workers, it's about creating a quieter work environment for everyone.
Precisely. Now for radiation hazards, action item. Develop a comprehensive radiation safety program that includes training, monitoring, and the use of personal protective equipment.
Safety first, especially when invisible forces are at play.
Now, for temperature hazards, action item. Develop a heat stress management plan that includes providing shade, water, and rest breaks for workers exposed to extreme heat. And for cold environments, make sure workers have access to warm clothing and heated break areas.
It's like tailoring the safety measures to the specific temperature risks of the workplace.
Exactly. And finally, for violence hazards, action item. Establish a zero-tolerance policy for workplace violence and provide training on conflict resolution, de-escalation techniques, and how to report incidents.
So it's not just about reacting to violence, it's about preventing it from happening in the first place.
Precisely. And remember, safety isn't just about following rules. It's about creating a culture where everyone feels valued, protected, and empowered to make a difference.
I love that. It's about shifting from a mindset of that's the safety officer's job to we're all in this together.
Exactly. And when you create that sense of shared responsibility, that's when safety truly becomes a way of life, not just a set of rules.
This has been so insightful. I feel like I've not only gained a ton of practical knowledge about safety, but also a deeper understanding of its importance on multiple levels. But before we wrap up this deep dive, let's explore one more crucial aspect of workplace safety: the mental and emotional well-being of our teams. We'll be right back after a quick message.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the physical hazards in the workplace, but what about the mental and emotional side of things?
Yeah, that's a really important point. Workplace safety isn't just about preventing those physical injuries, right? It's about fostering a holistic sense of well-being for everyone.
So things like stress, burnout, even just feeling overwhelmed, those can actually impact our ability to stay safe on the job.
Absolutely. When we're mentally and emotionally drained, our focus and decision-making abilities really suffer. We're more likely to make mistakes, take shortcuts, and overlook potential hazards.
It's like our brains are running on fumes. And that's when accidents are more likely to happen. Exactly. Think about it. If you're constantly worried about deadlines, or dealing with interpersonal conflicts,
Mhm.
or feeling unsupported, your mind just isn't fully present on the task at hand.
Right. That makes total sense. So for our listener who's, getting ready to give that safety talk, how can they address this mental and emotional aspect? It seems like kind of a sensitive topic.
It is. It definitely requires a delicate approach. You don't want to come across as like preachy or intrusive,
Yeah.
but you can subtly weave it into your talk. For example, when you're discussing a particular hazard, you could mention how fatigue or stress can increase the risk of an accident.
Oh, okay. So instead of just saying, always wear your safety glasses when operating machinery, you could add, and remember, if you're feeling tired or stressed, take a break. Your safety and the safety of others depends on it.
Exactly. It's about normalizing that conversation around mental health and acknowledging that it's okay to not be okay sometimes.
And I think that leads to another important point, creating a work environment where people feel comfortable speaking up about their concerns.
Absolutely. Psychological safety is so crucial. If someone's struggling with stress or anxiety, they need to feel safe talking to their supervisor or a trusted colleague without fear of judgment or repercussions.
It's like creating a culture where it's okay to say, hey, I'm not feeling myself today. I need to take a step back.
Precisely. And when people feel supported and empowered to prioritize their well-being, it creates a ripple effect throughout the entire workplace.
So what are some practical steps our listener can take to foster this sense of psychological safety in their team?
Lead by example. Be open about your own struggles
Yeah.
and encourage others to do the same. Make it clear that you value their well-being and that you're there to support them.
It's about being human, being vulnerable, and creating a space where everyone feels seen and heard.
Exactly. You can also implement initiatives like, mental health awareness training, employee assistance programs, or even just regular check-ins to see how people are doing.
It's about creating a culture of care and compassion, where safety goes beyond just physical protection.
Beautifully said. And remember, fostering a psychologically safe workplace isn't just the right thing to do, it's also good for business.
Oh, how so?
Well, when employees feel supported and valued, their morale and productivity increase. They're more engaged, more
Yeah.
creative, and more likely to go the extra mile. Plus, you'll likely see a reduction in absenteeism and turnover.
It's a win-win. This has been such an eye-opening deep dive. I feel like I've gained a whole new perspective on workplace safety.
I'm so glad to hear that. And remember, safety is an ongoing journey, not a destination. There's always more to learn, more ways to improve,
Yeah.
and more opportunities to create a safer and healthier workplace for everyone.
So to our listeners preparing to give a safety talk, remember to go beyond the basics, connect with your team on a personal level, share real-life stories, and emphasize the importance of mental and emotional well-being.
And most importantly, remember that safety is everyone's responsibility. Encourage your team to be proactive,
Yeah.
to speak up, and to look out for each other.
Because at the end of the day, we all want to go home safe and sound, both physically and mentally.
Well said. On that note, we'll leave our listener with this final thought. What small act of kindness or support can you offer a colleague today to enhance their well-being and create a safer, more positive work environment? It could be a simple compliment, a listening ear, or a gesture of appreciation. Remember, even small acts can make a big difference.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into workplace safety. Until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and stay safe.